Need another reason?
Entau, Maria.
The plan also includes an international discount at no extra charge.
I'll be there tomorrow.
You can even get an option that lets you save on calls away from home. And it's so easy to order. Just call 1-800-874-4300 and save on quality AT&T long distance, day and night. AT&T, the right choice.
Good morning to you all. I'm Bobby Batista.
And I'm Bob Kane. Here is an update on the war in the Persian Gulf. First, we are awaiting word of a briefing from Defense Secretary Dick Cheney from the Pentagon. When that comes up, or we get word it's about to begin, we will join it live. In the meantime, Operation Desert Storm continues to ravage Iraq and Kuwait, military targets there. Hundreds of warplanes, most of them U.S. planes, have blitzed targets in both countries. The aircraft, we believe, have hit Iraqi airfields, air defense facilities, Scud missile sites, command centers, and chemical weapons plants. So far, the Pentagon reports one U.S. aircraft has been downed, and that the pilot has apparently been lost. Britain also says one of its planes has not come back.
Allied military officials are calling the initial stages of the war successful, especially in that the alliance says it has sustained very few casualties. We have more now on the Persian Gulf developments from CNN's Jennifer Mickel.
U.S. paratroopers in Saudi Arabia eat up and gear up in case Operation Desert Storm goes from airstrike to ground assault.
Basically wait on the word when we're going to be moving, if we're going to be moving, and everybody's just glad it's finally getting started, and hopefully things are going to go all right.
I thought it was a good message for Mrs. Saddam.
Scores of U.S. airmen already have had their shot at the Iraqis, so have British, Saudi, and Kuwaiti flyers in waves of assault on Iraq and occupied Kuwait. French officials say their nation's warplanes also took part in a raid on Kuwait. British Royal Air Force pilots talked to reporters just after making their bombing runs.
So as I say, it ran on rails. It was well planned. You know, we achieved, well, we're going to have to wait and see what we achieved, but, you know, from what we saw, it looked good.
The initial word from U.S. and Allied officials, Operation Desert Storm was on target, virtually wiping out key Iraqi military installations, though at least one U.S. warplane and one British warplane were shot down in action.
Response from Iraq has been limited, and United States Air Forces have experienced minimal resistance.
British Defense Secretary Tom King says the Allied attacks have been well coordinated, but he says it's way too soon to claim victory.
And I would warn people against jumping to early conclusions. This is very early indeed in a very difficult challenge that we face against a country that possesses very considerable armaments, that possesses some very nasty weapons as well.
Iraq's ambassador to Britain provided his country's first on-camera response to the U.S.-led strike.
I have no details about the casualties. They should be very heavy.
Will the ferocity of the attack force Iraq to compromise?
Not at all.
In a show of defiance, and perhaps to show his people he's alive, Iraqi President Saddam Hussein gave a radio address and vowed he would not be crushed by the forces allied against him.
The criminals are not ashamed of themselves. And that criminal, the traitor, the custodian of the two holy mosques, and the traitor of the Islamic nation, who and his like, he means King Fahd, will rot in hell. He is a treacherous criminal, King.
We apologize for interrupting, but we understand Defense Secretary Dick Cheney is about to begin briefing reporters at the Pentagon. Let's listen.
To acknowledge your questions. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Pete. Well, as Pete mentioned, I have to leave after a few minutes. General Powell and I will take a couple of questions, and then I'm going to sneak off and turn you over to my compatriot. To date, the operation is going very well. I want, though, at the outset of my remarks this morning, to emphasize the importance of being cautious in our comments. I don't mean to be critical of our friends in the press corps, but I think it's very, very important for people to remember a number of key things. That this is a very serious business, that we are in the very early stages of an operation that may run for a considerable period of time. That there have been casualties, and there are likely to be more casualties. So while we feel very good about the progress to date, it is important, I think, for everyone to be careful about claiming victory or making assumptions about the ultimate cost of this operation in terms of casualties. So far, so good. But I would urge all of you to be cautious in your reporting, just as we're trying very hard to be very cautious and very precise in terms of what we say about the status of the operation to date. We've now flown over 1,000 air sorties in the first 14 hours of the operation. There have been over 100 TLAMs, Tomahawk cruise missiles, launched as well. So far, as of 0900 this morning, Washington time, there's been a single American aircraft lost and one British aircraft lost as well. At present, we are in the process of using our intelligence assets to assess the damage that has been achieved. As that process is completed, decisions will be made about going back to restrike those targets that require additional attention, while we at the same time continue to pursue and carry out the original plan for mission. The original plan specifically allowed for this kind of retargeting of targets that need to be hit for a second time. It's a normal part of the operation. As I mentioned last night, the operation will continue until we achieve our objectives of forcing Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait and implementing the United Nations Security Council resolutions. We'd be happy to take your questions.
Could you please describe the plane that went down on the American side, the type of plane, number of casualties?
It involves a single casualty. I don't know that we want to identify the aircraft, do we?
It was an F-18.
Was that a wound or a death? Or?
A death.
What other information do you have about casualties?
All I can give you at this time is that the total U.S. losses are one aircraft and one individual.
Did Iraq manage to fire any Scud missiles?
Insofar as I'm aware, there have been no Scud launches.
Secretary Cheney, how would you describe the tactics by Saddam Hussein? Would you say that he could be intentionally laying low as some type of strategy and counterattack or anything?
That may well be the case, but I think I'm going to yield to my chief military advisor to address that issue.
Good after you leave, sir.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
Can you tell us that the operation is still a total air operation? We have reports of some movement of ground troops near the border. Is there a preparation phase that's going on for ground troops?
Again, we never get into the business of speculating about future operations in order to safeguard the security of those operations. The activities that are now underway are obviously primarily the air portion of the campaign. That does not mean that we will not at some point engage ground forces as well. But we don't have anything to announce at this point on that.
Do you expect it to continue for hours or days? Weeks? What is your opinion?
As I said earlier, I think the best way to think about it is that these the early stages of the air portion of the campaign that we are now embarked upon, and it could run for some period of time. We are prepared to continue the operation just as long as we need to in order to achieve our objectives being getting Saddam out of Kuwait and implementing the UN Security Council resolutions. That could be a significant period of time, or it could be a relatively short period of time. That'll depend upon the success of the campaign and upon how he reacts to it.
Mr. Secretary, do you have any reports of damaged aircraft? The French said that 4 of their aircraft were pretty heavily damaged, but they only had 1 slight injury. How about our aircraft? How are they holding up?
I'll yield to General Powell on that. My general impression is that they're performing very well, that any damaged aircraft has been minimal, except for, of course, that one loss of an aircraft.
Mr. Secretary,
one more question.
Did any Iraqi aircraft take off to engage the attacking force?
I'm going to leave that to General Powell and...
Secretary, can I ask you one more question, sir? Is there any possibility that there will at some point during the air war be some kind of a pause to give Saddam Hussein the opportunity to rethink his commitment to staying in Kuwait, or is this a non-stop operation as far as the coalition is concerned?
As far as the coalition is concerned, and as far as my orders from the President are concerned, we've been instructed to execute the plan, to carry on these operations until we have achieved our objective. Our objective is to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. To follow up on a couple of questions, I only have a report of one other U.S. aircraft damage. There may be others, but those reports have not come into me yet.
Any evidence, General, of any counteroffensive at all by the Iraqis, either on the ground or otherwise?
No, the only Iraqi action I'm aware of was the artillery strike across the border into Ras al-Khaji, which you've seen on television, which hit one oil petroleum storage facility, but it's not been followed up, and we have silenced that.
How do you counter that? Does it surprise you?
You'll have to ask them. I'm rather pleased that we appear to have achieved tactical surprise. We should not, however, rule out the possibility of Iraqi action either in the air or on the ground, and I can assure you that we are on the lookout for it.
Any damage assessment, sir, of Iraqi aircraft, airfields? Can you give us any rough sense of what you have built successfully?
Of all of the air sorties that went in, we are rating 80% of them as having been effective, meaning the aircraft got to its target, delivered its ordnance, and returned. For those that are in the 20%, that includes those that had mechanical problems, weather problems, or because of the very tight control we had over the aircraft, they did not make the kind of positive identification of the target that we required before going in and launching under the rules of engagement to minimize collateral civilian damage. So we're very satisfied with that level of performance on the part of our aircraft. We are pleased with the initial results. We have damaged the command and control capability of the Iraqi government and the Iraqi armed forces. We believe we have done reasonably well, as best we know right now, with the preliminary bomb damage assessment in attacking airfields, attacking fixed Scud facilities around the countryside, but I once again caution you that this is very preliminary, only 12 hours into the operation.
General Powell, give us some idea of the targets that were struck and the priority given to those targets and the weapons used against those targets.
The targets that were struck initially dealt with air defense systems, command and control installations, and the Iraqi Air Force and their ability to interfere with our air operations. B-52s were used, F-117s, F-15s, F-16s, A-10s, F-111s, F-A-18s, A-6s, A-7s, Apache helicopters, Tornadoes from the United Kingdom, Tornadoes from Saudi Arabia, Jaguars from the French, and the Kuwaiti Air Force is also involved. Specific ordnance loads are those ordnance loads commonly associated with these aircraft. I don't have any more specific information on that, Dave.
Cruise missiles, the Secretary said more than 100 cruise missiles. What were they used against?
They were used against a variety of targets where their precision was required for the target, or because of the air defense system around those targets, we felt that an unmanned weapon was the best system to use. It was I got to say, it was an extremely detailed, well thought out plan. A lot of credit has to go to General Schwarzkopf and especially to General Horner, the commander of Central Command Air Forces, for the integration of this plan. Enormously complex, and it was a single plan encompassing all U.S. forces and all Allied forces participating in the operation, all responding to the direction of a single commander with a single air tasking order.
General Powell, in laying out your initial list of targets, you didn't mention the Iraqi Republican Guards or ground forces. Where were they in the sequence of the priority of targets? And what
I really don't want to. I'm deliberately trying not to give prioritization or sequencing, because it is a plan that is unfolding, and there is a concept behind it
And if I say too much about it, then I'm giving away the total concept, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Can you say if they were struck and if you did...
USS was... We are looking at live pictures of the battleship USS Wisconsin. I'm sorry, not live pictures, but tape, which we are just receiving now. And we see in the center of the picture, if you have been watching, a missile launcher being raised into position. That is a Tomahawk missile launcher. That is one of the kinds of cruise missiles launched against Iraq in last night's attack. Now back to the Pentagon briefing with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell.
You can't predict where they're liable to be. Trying to locate mobile Scud launchers, of course.
General, do you feel that, in a general sense, the attack has been effective enough to give the United States control of Iraqi airspace? And if it falls somewhat short of that, perhaps you could just generally tell us how effective you think it's been.
I'm comfortable that we are able to achieve control of Iraqi airspace. That is not to say that the Iraqi Air Force has been totally destroyed at this time. Since I spoke to you last evening, I've had further reports that suggest they did come up. There were some air-to-air engagements. I'm not prepared to give you the results of those air-to-air engagements, except to say we have lost no aircraft as a result of those engagements. So the Iraqi Air Force is still out there, and we're going to work on them in their airfields.
General, were you at all surprised that the Iraqi air defenses weren't more effective?
Was I what?
Were you at all surprised that the Iraqi air defenses weren't more effective?
I'm very pleased that they weren't more effective. I will not get into the details of why we believe they were not effective, because obviously I don't wish them to know why I believe they were not effective.
General, with all of this... Were there other Iraqi troop divisions that we targeted, and do we have any estimate how many Iraqi soldiers may have been killed in the bombings?
No, I'm not able to answer that at this time. It is a comprehensive campaign with, as I've said many times, air, land, and sea components. And we have thought it out. It will unfold over a period of time. But I can't answer your question directly, except to underscore what the Secretary has said. Dampen down some of the euphoria. We have just begun a campaign. It'll run for some time.
Along those lines,
yes,
with all of the optimism about the initial stages of this war, what right now is your gravest concern?
I don't know that I have any grave concerns. I'm always concerned about the welfare of our GIs who are participating in the operation. But after 12 and almost a half hours of this campaign, I am very pleased that our initial objectives have been achieved. I am satisfied with the way the campaign is unfolding.
But strategically, what are your concerns right now still?
Don't know that I have any particular strategic concerns. My principal concern is to accomplish the mission. And we have to remember the mission isn't to bomb a while and pause and see if something happens. The mission is to eject the Iraqi army out of Kuwait and to assist in the restoration of the legitimate government of Kuwait, and our entire campaign plan is focused on those two objectives.
What is the extent of the damage specifically to the chemical and to the nuclear plant?
We are pleased with the performance of our systems against those facilities. I'm not prepared to tell you right now because we don't know yet what the extent of damage is. We're going through that analysis now. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us, General, anything about the reports of heavy air attacks in the Basra area, and to what extent have we attacked the fortified positions in Kuwait, the dug-in positions in Kuwait?
Basra, of course, is a center of gravity for the Iraqi forces within the Kuwaiti theater of operations, and is very much on our target list and in our area of interest, but I don't have specific information, and I'm not prepared to comment on what we might be doing against dug-in ground forces at this time. It's still unfolding. Back over here.
Any reports yet of collateral damage, especially in Baghdad, and was there any attempt to go after the anti-aircraft units that are within the Iraqi ground forces in southern Iraq or Kuwait?
Certainly, we are interested in the anti-aircraft units within the Iraqi ground forces in due course, and we want to get the air defense system taken care of to give us absolute freedom of movement through the air. We have been very sensitive to collateral damage in the Baghdad area, and I think the best source of how careful we have been is listening to the CNN reporters who are watching it unfold. We were very concerned about collateral damage, making sure that no innocent civilians were killed or injured, and we were very sensitive to cultural and religious sites within the area. Yes.
General, can you tell us, you talked just briefly about the sortie rate, and 80% sorties were effective. Can you comment generally about cruise missiles, and how effective were the Tomahawk cruise missiles?
I'm extremely pleased with the effectiveness of the cruise missiles.
General, how are Navy aircraft used?
The Navy aircraft were totally integrated into the single air plan, and frankly, they were all indistinguishable. Obviously, where they're located had something to do with where they were targeted to go, but it was one single plan, and Navy aircraft came out of both the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea.
2 carriers or all 6 carriers?
I don't want to get into specifically which carriers launched at what time and which aircraft, but it is a single integrated attack plan.
General, you said last night, General Powell, that you all were not, in fact, tracking Saddam Hussein or where he was. If one of the primary goals was to knock out Iraq's military leadership, why weren't you tracking him?
We were not targeting him, per se. We were not, because, frankly, I have learned from previous experience how difficult it can be to track a head of state in whom you might be interested. And I think we've spent a good part of the morning of the 20th of December, 1989 in this room discussing that subject. So we simply weren't. What we were going after was the command and control of Iraqi armed forces and how their national command authority controls those forces, and that's what we were interested in, rather than chasing somebody around the countryside. Yes, sir.
Anything on Iraqi troop defections?
No, I don't have anything on Iraqi troop defections.
On the command and
Defectors,
control,
sir.
on the command and control, can you give us some assessment without being overly optimistic?
Who's overly optimistic?
I'm not saying whether you are or aren't. I'm just saying, can you give us an assessment as to whether the Iraqi troops are in, they have a chain of command, or whether there is some...
I think we have damaged their command and control system. I don't think it's collapsed yet.
Do you have many defectors, sir?
I do not have any reports on
General
defectors.
Powell, are you concerned about any border activity? Are you possibly someone else coming in to aid Iraq, possibly Iran, any type of last-minute coalitions?
I don't expect that. It seems to me the coalition is holding together rather well. I'm very pleased with that, and a lot of the soothsaying that went on about how we wouldn't be able to command and control this whole thing. The whole thing will collapse and you guys won't be able to manage it. I think our experience so far for the last 12 or so hours, we've done that very well.
You described a pause, and you said to see what happens. What does that mean?
I'm sorry?
You talked about a pause a few minutes ago.
No, I didn't.
And you said to see what happens.
I dismissed that.
You dismissed it, I'm sorry.
What I'm saying is we have been given a direction to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait and to assist in the restoration of the legitimate government of Kuwait, and that's what our military campaign is designed to do.
General, does your plan
I'm sorry, you had one, if I may.
General, were Iraqi TV and radio transmitters targeted? Are you surprised that they're still on the air?
We were targeting the means by which the leadership of Iraq talks to its soldiers and communicates and maintains control, and I think we have done some considerable damage to that ability, at least according to what Bernie Shaw tells me. And we will continue to review the bidding on that.
General, we were told that there's a small movement of ground troops. Could you tell us, please, the extent?
Ours or theirs?
Allied.
Allied?
Could you tell us the extent, please, and where that is taking place?
I'm not confirming that there was such movement. Let me just say that you shouldn't be surprised if you hear reports of such movement. It is one campaign, the air campaign, which has gone very well, and I can't tell you how proud I am of all of our airmen for what they've done in the last 14 hours. But it is just one part of a total campaign. The air campaign began last night and will continue to the end. Now, ground campaign does not necessarily mean that we're going to cross the border right away. Just the positioning of troops in various places, I consider part of the ground campaign, the overall campaign. The movement of amphibious forces in the Persian Gulf, I consider part of the overall campaign. And I would hope that the Iraqi leadership, the Iraqi military, who may be trying to follow all these events, should get greatly concerned about our ability not just to use one tool, but to use all the tools in the toolbox that we brought to this effort.
General, what can you tell us about reports that Iraq has...
Two more. You're first. I'm
What
sorry.
can you tell us about reports that Iraq has stuck some of its air defenses in bunkers, be it planes or additional missiles, and that they are prepared then to launch those at some point in the future against us?
Well, if they leave their airplanes in bunkers, then those airplanes are not up giving us difficulty, and we know where the bunkers are, and in due course we will take care of it.
They do exist?
Bunkers, oh yeah, they have hardened bunkers, quite sophisticated hardened bunkers.
Was there any common stream to what caused the losses, such as anti-aircraft or missiles, or what kind of fire brought them?
Well, there's not a trend. I mean, there's only been 2 confirmed losses, and I don't want to get into what those losses were caused by.
The strongest response has been most effective?
There was a great deal of surface-to-air missile fire, and there was a great deal of anti-aircraft gunfire. But as far as I want to get into, and then that one, and then I'll probably go through.
General, besides the various installations that we've talked about that we're bombing, are we dropping bombs on Iraqi infantry brigades or other troops?
Allow me to duck that for the time being. The campaign will grow and spread, and you will see other parts of it emerge in due course, and you will understand the very comprehensive nature in this campaign. But allow me to dodge that for the moment. Thank you very much.
Can you stop this campaign? Is there any diplomatic demarches from the President?
We'll do whatever the President asks us to do.
As we wrap up this Pentagon briefing in Washington by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, we've just received this off the wires, and we have no way of confirming it at this point, but Egypt's government media is reporting that 50 Iraqi tank crews have deserted their posts in Kuwait and are headed for the Allied side. Again, repeating, Egypt's media is reporting that 50 Iraqi tank crews have deserted their posts in Kuwait and are headed for the Allied side. Again, we have no way of confirming that at this time. Bob?
Bobby, among the highlights just covered by Defense Secretary Dick Cheney and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, briefing reporters at the Pentagon, are that over 1,000 sorties now have been flown by planes from the Allies in Saudi Arabia against targets in Iraq and Kuwait, against Iraqi targets in Iraq and Kuwait. Both men reconfirmed the loss of one U.S. F-18 Hornet fighter plane and the apparent loss of the pilot of that plane. He's also been reported variously as missing. Also, one British plane, a Tornado, lost, and the pilot of that plane apparently also. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said he was, in response to a question, extremely pleased by the performance of the Tomahawk missile. If you were watching the news conference, you saw footage, unedited tape footage CNN has just obtained of launchings of the Tomahawk cruise missile from the battleship USS Wisconsin. Those Tomahawk cruises were sent into the outskirts of Baghdad and other locations in what's now become the war theater in one of the first steps. One of the most profoundly affected institutions by such an action as what's going on in the Middle East, the stock market. You just heard the opening bell on the New York Stock Exchange, and there is now silence there. That silence being observed in honor of what is going on in the Persian Gulf. Machinery of the New York Stock Exchange delay is going into action for 1 minute in honor of what is going on in the Persian Gulf and the role of Americans in that role. When we resume our coverage, we will be talking with CNN correspondent Richard Roth in Tel Aviv. Stay with us.
Washington apples. They're as good as you've heard.
Tri-City, the world's largest sporting goods store, is having its 30 to 50% off sale. Right now, you'll save at least 30 to 50% off our entire stock of snow skis, ski boots, bindings, parkas, ski pants, sweaters, and bibs. All 30 to 50% off. Nothing held back. It's an avalanche of values. Nobody in the world has as much quality name brand ski merchandise on sale under one roof as Tri-City, the world's largest sporting goods store. Open weeknights till 9 p.m. or shop by phone. Call 651-9600.
This is Jim Southwick at Berkeley Toyota. It's true, more people are buying new Toyotas from Berkeley Toyota. We are winning this fight for your business. Truckloads of new Toyotas are arriving in Berkeley daily. As always, our salespeople will smash high prices and get you what you need and want. Remember, we are the Bay Area's only full-service Toyota dealership with discount tire center, complete body and paint shop, team service department, late model Toyota trade-ins. Come prepared to buy today from Berkeley Toyota because nobody beats Berkeley. They never have, and they never will.
These young people are involved in treatment for alcoholism, depression, behavior problems, drug abuse. They're learning a creative approach to problem solving. It's a journey in growth and development which can change their lives. Treatment for adolescents doesn't have to be depressing.
Introducing The Journey, only at Oak Creek Hospital. Call 800-926-9994.
The Federal Aviation Administration confirms that the level of airport security across the United States has increased overnight. Joining us on the phone right now is Chief Media Spokesperson for the FAA, Paul Stuckey. And Mr. Stuckey, you say that you've increased the security at airports. How high of a level are we taking that to?
Well, we're not in the position of actually describing the level. What I wanted to do was assure the public that the FAA is definitely working closer with the airlines and airport authorities and to ensure a heightened level, and we have done that, working closely with the airlines and the airport authorities.
What exactly does this increased security entail? Can you tell us that?
Well, there's a double-edged problem to that. If I tell you in much detail anything, then the problem will be that the people we're trying to stop will have a great deal of information to work with to everybody's disadvantage.
Okay, I understand that. What then does it mean to the public? Will there be changes in airport operations?
Well, the public will see some things and a lot of things they won't see. Basically, what we would probably suggest is that the public get to the airport earlier than they have in the past, and they'll see some changes with regard to some increase in security personnel and that kind of thing. There's some obvious things, and there'll be a lot of things that they won't know about.
All right, our thanks to Paul Stuckey, Chief Media Spokesperson for the FAA. Bob?
Bobby, there are a few places on Earth outside the actual Kuwaiti-Iraqi theater of operations where tensions might be higher or apprehension greater than in Israel, the threatened primary target of Saddam Hussein. CNN correspondent Richard Roth is in Tel Aviv. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Tel Aviv is known as the city that never stops. Right now, the city is not exactly living up to that slogan. As you can see probably behind me, all the streets are empty here. Stores are closed. They have been all day. Everyone in the state of Israel has been told by the government to remain indoors. This was the city that Saddam Hussein said would be the first target for his missiles, and he threatened a possible chemical weapons attack. Millions of gas masks have been distributed here in this city. Now, some of the developments that have been occurring today, the defense minister of Israel, Moshe Aaron, said that the U.S. strike on Baghdad and other parts of Iraq was effective, but the threat of a missile attack still exists. Prime Minister Shamir of Israel is still cautious. He says it looks good, but we still have to be careful. Israelis, though, were jubilant earlier this morning about the results that were reported by the first waves of bombers over Baghdad. And for this city, the night was rather quiet, but everyone was braced indoors for what might have occurred. The residents of Tel Aviv had a very tense early morning.
As U.S. planes roared over Baghdad, to the west, Tel Aviv, the city Saddam Hussein proclaimed would be his first target, held its collective breath. On the streets, the few people out were either carrying radios or boxes with gas masks inside. The government had instituted civil defense emergency regulations. People were told to stay home, open their gas mask kits, and keep them nearby. Soldiers rushed into the Army headquarters in Tel Aviv.
Others waited for buses to go on duty. At those places that were open, first reports on the U.S. raid were encouraging.
The situation is very good, quiet, nobody is worried about this.
But though chemical weapons did not rain down on the city, many were still scared.
Am I afraid? Very, yes, I am afraid.
A few ignored the government order to stay indoors.
Life must go on.
And right on schedule, the sun came up on Tel Aviv. But this would be a morning not seen since perhaps past outbreaks of war. No one was out on the roads. Stores would not be opening, especially not the Baghdad Cafe. Those who were out liked the news from the Gulf.
My reaction was satisfaction that somebody has done something against President Saddam Hussein in Iraq and brought order to the world.
But a former Israeli defense minister said it's not over yet.
I believe that the first strike was very successful, almost unbelievable. But you have to bear in mind, you don't win a war by the first strike.
There is still a lot of fear in Tel Aviv. Thousands called civil defense centers to ask for more information. At the main hospital of Tel Aviv, stretchers to be used in case of casualties remained unfilled. Out to see his city in the sunshine was the mayor of Tel Aviv, accompanied by the music director of the Israeli Philharmonic, Zubin Mehta. They felt it's too early to celebrate, but...
I'm happy. I mean, I respect, first of all, the Americans. They fulfilled their commitment, and they practically saved the whole world. Yeah. And secondly, I'm very happy that we were, for the time being, I knock on wood, see, we were not hit.
This is the city Saddam said would be the first place he would send his missiles.
It's the first and last joke that I heard lately.
Now, I have a feeling that as the sun goes down here, some of the residents of Tel Aviv who were making jokes earlier in the day are rather tense now, with Saddam Hussein still around, still talking tough, at least to his people, as this city braces for who knows what. Some of the other developments, brief update on U.S. Ambassador William Brown to Israel, met with the Foreign Minister, David Levy of Israel. The minister praised the U.S. efforts and called the raid on Iraq an example of courage. There was cooperation between these two countries. The U.S. kept Israel informed on the timing of the raid. And also, military analysts here are comparing the strike with the success Israel had in 1967, wiping out the Egyptian Air Force on the ground in the Six-Day War. Curfew still in effect in the West Bank. 1.7 million people under a clampdown by authorities. Soldiers are warning the people there with loudspeakers that anyone who comes outside runs the risk of being shot if they leave their home. The Jerusalem police chief says we are in a period of war and are acting accordingly. And one final odd note, Hadassah Hospital says that early this morning there was sort of a mini record for the number of births that were born that occurred here. No explanation so far for that. Richard Roth, CNN, reporting live from Tel Aviv.
Developments continue to unfold related to the war in the Persian Gulf. At 10 o'clock Eastern Time, about 20 minutes from now, we expect a military briefing from U.S. officials in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We plan to bring you live coverage of that. And then at 10:30 Eastern Time, British Prime Minister John Major is to address Parliament again. We expect to bring you live coverage. Molly?
In the meantime, CNN correspondent Jeff Flock has been traveling the nation's heartland trying to take the pulse of the American public on the events in the Gulf. I imagine that pulse has quickened quite a bit with in light of the events in the past 14 hours. Jeff, you're in Independence, Missouri, we understand. Good morning, and where are you exactly in Independence?
Morning to you, Bobby. We're at the Continental Barber Shop here. I guess the fact is that life goes on in Middle America this morning. Folks are still going to work, still getting their hair cut, but I think they go on about their business here and elsewhere with an eye to the television monitor and ear to the radio. What is Middle America thinking this morning? Let's go find out. Sir, your thoughts this morning? We've been watching television all morning, and I assume you were watching last night. What's going through your mind this morning?
Well, I'm very concerned for all of our men and women overseas, but I'm very supportive of our president. The only regrets I have is for those ones in our country that are burning our American flag, and that upsets me very much.
All right, sir. Thank you very, very much. Let's move on down, if we can. Sir, we just heard General Powell and Secretary Cheney talk about the possibility of a protracted battle, possibility of more casualties. Does that concern you?
I'd like to see no casualties at all, but peace doesn't come cheap.
What are your thoughts?
I think they're doing the right thing. I support the president 100%.
Fears?
No, not really. I just fear for all the people over there. I hope that few casualties as possible.
Okay, good deal. Thank you, sir. As you watched this morning, first word from our military leaders about what had happened, what was going through your mind, sir?
First thing went through my mind was a lot of sadness for what was taking place. However, I felt that what was transpiring was necessary, and I was supportive of the president and our country, and I'm looking forward to the boys coming home as quick as possible. I was surprised at the speed at which the attack took place and the completeness of what they had done. And so I'm really proud that I'm part of this country and we stand for what we do.
Did you believe, Randy, did you believe this would actually happen?
No, I didn't believe it actually happened, but I'm for our president. I think he's making the right decision.
I think it's fair to say that at this moment, as we have sampled the pulse of Middle America, that right now, what these gentlemen are indicating is fairly well representative of this town that we are in, but we will continue to watch it. We will continue to travel across Middle America and let you know what you're thinking. I'm Jeff Locke, CNN, reporting live from Independence, Missouri.
All right, Jeff, and our thanks to you. Now back to Bob.
We are just getting word from Hans Einshaus, the emergency coordinator of the United Nations Disaster Relief Organization, that the Jordanian government, having been promised help from that UN agency, has agreed now to reopen its border with Iraq sometime within the next 24 hours and to accept all refugees from the Persian Gulf War. Jordan had closed its border during the course of the past week because it said its resources were simply exhausted. It could no longer cope with the flood of refugees of all nationalities flooding in across the Iraqi border. CNN correspondent Doug James is in Amman and joins us. Good morning, Doug.
Of course, what was a pre-war exodus out of Iraq into Jordan has now become a post-war exodus. Earlier today, there was a trickle of cars coming across the border, people with the special permission to cross the border. Now we do hear from the UN that it is possible the border will open entirely for anyone who wants to come across. Of course, the urgency is much greater now that the war has begun. We're also hearing at this hour that the Soviet ambassador to Jordan has just delivered a personal letter from President Gorbachev to King Hussein. We don't know the details of that letter, but one might speculate that he's urging King Hussein to do his best to stay out of the conflict in an effort to keep Israel out of the conflict. He may also be thanking him for his past efforts at mediation and hoping that in the future King Hussein may still be able to play some kind of a post-crisis role in trying to solve some of the broader issues here in the Middle East. There's some feeling here in Amman that outside people are in danger, in particular U.S. people, as a result of that. Security around the embassies, the U.S. Embassy and other Western diplomatic missions has increased today. There have been few incidents, I might add. Apparently early today, somebody threw rocks through the Egyptian ambassador's residence windows. A few journalists have also been roughed up. As a result of that, the authorities here have started taking away certain press passes from photojournalists, from camera crews, ostensibly to keep them safe as they go out on the street. This is Doug James reporting live from Amman, Jordan.
Thank you, Doug. We will be watching. Bobby?
Let's go back now to CNN's Frank Sesno at the White House, where the president and his advisors have much on their minds and their agenda today. Morning to you, Frank, once again.
Good morning again, Bobby. The president and his advisors are indeed meeting with the congressional leadership just now. I was in the photo opportunity just a few moments ago where a subdued, soft-spoken president spoke very cautiously about what is going on. Let's take a look at that tape now.
Damage, how long this may last, and at what cost?
Well, again, I don't want to go into questions here because of the moment. I will say that is covered very well by Secretary Cheney and Colin Powell, and the way we're going to handle this is I will not be commenting on the ups and downs, there will be some downs, or the trauma of the moment. There's a lot of trauma at the moment, but I think it is fair to say, and I will be repeating this to the leaders here, that we are pleased with the way things have gone so far. We are determined to finish what we've set out to do, but I just think for procedural reasons I'd like you all to know that I'm not going to be trying to do briefings from the White House on the details of the operations over there. I have full confidence in our Secretary of Defense and in our able Chairman of the Joint Chiefs,
and of course in our General Schwarzkopf. So for the future, though I will be in touch with the American people, I think it's better to leave the details of the operation to the briefings over there, and of course I'll be available for questions from time to time. But when we don't have all the information, I just would hate to risk misleading the American people. Having said that, I think all of us are very pleased that so far the operation is going forward with great success, and we keep praying that the loss of life will be held at an absolute minimum. And I feel so strongly about our troops over there. Certainly I feel that way about them, and I feel that way about the innocents who might get caught up in this conflict. So I think it's fair to say there's a lot of prayer going on both here on the Capitol Hill and across this whole country, and it'll be that way till this is concluded. That's all I want to say about it right now. Thank you.
So are you concerned this early talk success might lead to unwarranted optimism on some front?
No, I'm not concerned. There is no unwarranted optimism, and there will be none. And I would refer you to the briefing, Secretary of Defense, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Thank you all very much. We got a little business to attend to. Thank you guys for yesterday. Thank you.
Now, as we left that photo session with the congressional leadership, the president was heard to say that he's determined to keep the leaders briefed, to be seen with the leadership, and to be keeping them informed throughout this. A senior White House official says he expects a Senate resolution today, a House resolution tomorrow, endorsing and supporting the president and the U.S. troops currently at war in the Persian Gulf. I'm Frank Sesno, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
All right, Frank, and we'll be checking in with Frank again soon. Bob?
The New York Stock Exchange opened less than 20 minutes ago. Traders have much to which to react today. CNN's Jan Hopkins is on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Jan.
And Bob, the reaction is incredible. It was widely expected that when war broke out, that stocks would fall. Instead, the world's stock markets are exploding with buying on the apparent early success of Operation Desert Storm. On Wall Street, trading has opened about 20 minutes. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 72 points. We'll take another look at how Wall Street is taking the news in a few minutes. But first, let's look at how the markets are doing around the world. In London, a major rally is underway. Right now, the Financial Times 100 index up 61.6 at 2116.4. The Frankfurt Exchange shares closed up 7%. The Paris Bourse is up 7.25%. In Tokyo, stocks soared to their 10th largest gain ever. The Nikkei index gains more than 1,000 points, or 4.4%. Nikkei closed the session at 23,400. Oil prices plunged on optimism that a short war will not disrupt oil supplies. Right now in London, a barrel of Brent North Sea crude is down $8.10 at $20.90. And in New York, trading has just opened on light sweet crude. It has opened down $7.50 at $24.50. And I must tell you that that is the limit that it can fall, and it is twice as much as it has ever fallen before. Treasury's 30-year bellwether bond is rallying up 2.5 points. The yield down to 8.17%, and the dollar is falling. The New York Stock Exchange has been open again. Let's check and see what the Dow is doing at this point. It is up 71 points. That's the latest from Wall Street. We'll have another report in 1 hour. I'm Jan Hopkins reporting live from the New York Stock Exchange.
A program reminder, we do expect a briefing on the Pan-Arab forces in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, coming up in about 9 minutes from now at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, as our coverage continues.
You'll see the difference in Safeway's quality grain-fed beef. All Safeway beef is USDA inspected and quarter-inch trim. It's a difference you can taste. Safeway's boneless beef roasts are lean, tender, and juicy. Choose from rump, bottom round, cross rib, or underblade chuck. And you'll save 80 cents a pound. Our mouth-watering boneless beef roasts are an incredible $1.99 a pound. This week, only at Safeway.
This is me. This is me. I could never have done this without Jenny Craig. Yeah, I feel so much younger, and I know I look younger. So in the mornings when I know that I look especially cute, and I'll go and I'll say, honey, my husband will go, oh, baby, you look so nice. You ought to be proud of yourself. And I just turn around and let him look at me.
Join our new Success program for only a $79 service fee. Call 1-800-76-JENNY.
Hi, Marty Sherman. It's our January stock reduction and clearance sale. All overstocked items must be sold immediately. Savings like this happen only once. Don't miss it.
At first, I was really only thinking of chicken. You know, something healthy and quick for my family. We were sitting right here kicking around recipe ideas, and a friend of mine said, what about turkey? And just like that, we were into Turkey by George. Just think, fresh turkey ready in minutes in flavors like hickory barbecue and mustard tarragon. No preservatives, no MSG, and all less than 200 calories. So if you want something healthy, easy to make, and just a little different, we're ready to talk turkey.
It's the party of the year, the Harlem Globetrotters 65th anniversary. A celebration of fun with the world's original party animals. Yeah! Jumping, dunking, rocking and rolling, having a ball, spinning the magic of 65 years. So get ready and blast off for the Harlem Globetrotters 65th anniversary special celebration.
At the Oakland Coliseum, January 26th, and Maples Pavilion at Stanford University, January 27th. Tickets to the box office and all Bass Ticketmaster locations.
And the Gulf continues now with further updates from Washington, D.C. CNN's Mary Tillotson joins us from Capitol Hill, where there's a lot of maneuvering, and I would imagine a lot of advice being given out today. Mary, good morning.
Good morning. The advice right now, if any, is being delivered at the White House. Congressional leaders are meeting at this hour with Mr. Bush. After that, those leaders of Congress and the president plan to attend a prayer vigil. Then at a later point in the day, Defense Secretary Cheney expects to arrive on Capitol Hill for a closed-door briefing on the latest news from the Iraq war with members of Congress. So far, that news is almost all good from the Allied perspective. 2 Allied planes now confirmed down. That is the bad news. One of them an American plane, one British. But otherwise, those early bombing strikes in the first hours of this war seem to be going as the Allied forces would wish. In fact, it's so successful that Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Sam Nunn on CNN's air earlier this morning said that Operation Desert Storm opens up a new era in aerial warfare.
I think we're close to having air superiority, but we still have some dangers. They could put up some aircraft, and they could even go on kamikaze-type missions. You never know about that. You have to be prepared for it. We have the danger of, although we think we've got most of the fixed-site Scud missiles, they could have some Scud missiles hidden. They're mobile, and they could have them hidden. And, of course, we've got the danger of the artillery. That's sort of the ultimate danger when we have to use ground forces.
Senator Nunn says that he hopes a hard enough pounding by air would make such a ground war against Iraq unnecessary, since ground warfare is where the Allies could expect the heaviest casualties. Nunn says the Allied air power at this point is so vastly superior to Iraq that what he's hoping for at this point is what he called a psychological collapse on the other side. But Senator Nunn concedes it's much too early to predict that will happen. Mary Tillotson, CNN Live on Capitol Hill.
All right, Mary, thanks. Now joining us to give his perspective on the Gulf War is retired U.S. Army Colonel Trevor Dupuy. Colonel Dupuy is in our Washington bureau this morning. And, Colonel, the offensive has been underway now for over 50 or close to 15 hours. The initial airstrike on Iraqi communications and military installations reportedly carried out as planned. And as General Powell said a few moments ago, the purpose is to eject Iraq out of Kuwait. So what happens next, or out of Iraq, rather, Kuwait, what happens next?
A continuation of the air offensive will undoubtedly take place for a day or two, and as long as a week or two before there is a major involvement of ground forces is my suspicion.
So it is a dangerous miscalculation for us to have assumed that this would have been an air victory alone.
No, it is not a dangerous miscalculation. It is a distinct possibility, as Senator Nunn said. This has never before happened in history, but the circumstances in the Gulf today are such that it is quite possible, although, like Senator Nunn, I'm not willing to predict that yet.
All right, if it does go to a ground offensive, how will we penetrate the heavy concentration of Iraqi troops at the Kuwaiti border?
Well, I think we'll do two things. First place, we will probe to see where there are weak spots in that heavy concentration. But more than that, I think we'll go around that heavy concentration by what I would call a triple envelopment, a wide envelopment across the desert by our armored forces to come into Kuwait from the west, north of Kuwait City, an amphibious landing someplace along the coast, probably north of Kuwait City, and an air operation. We have an airborne division and an air assault division in between to encircle the forces in Iraq, in Kuwait.
Will we or should we go into Iraq?
Well, obviously, we are now fighting in Iraq with our Air Force. I think that the objective is very clear, that we are to eject the Iraqis from Kuwait, but if it requires, in order to assure the success of that mission, if it requires going into Iraq, I'm sure our forces are prepared to do that.
All right, Colonel Dupree, thank you very much for your perspective. Bob?
We are going to take a brief pause now to allow our cable company affiliates to do something to pay their bills. Our continued coverage will resume shortly.
This is KTVU, Channel 2, your Fox affiliate in the Bay Area.
Good morning and welcome to Mornings on 2. It has been an historic 24 hours. We will be breaking away from our normal Mornings on 2 format this morning for the obvious reason. We want to bring you all of the latest information as it comes into us about Operation Desert Storm. And let's start that off by going right to Terry Lowry for the latest on the war in the Gulf. Terry?
Thank you, Steve. It is Thursday, shortly after 6 p.m. in the Persian Gulf, day 2 of the U.S.-led war against Iraq. A lot has happened overnight, including 2 more Allied air assaults and what appears to be the first American casualty. The loss reportedly came when a U.S. airman was shot down by Iraq in the first wave of attacks. The second assault by Allied forces began shortly after midnight, the third around 5:45. All 100 Iraqi airfields reportedly suffered major, if not complete, damage. About a half hour ago, Egypt reported 50 Iraqi tank crews deserted their post in Kuwait, all hoping to defect to the Allied side. And just moments ago, a somber but confident President Bush spoke out for the first time since ordering the nation to war.
Right, she's ready. She's ready. Go. She's go.
Earlier this morning, top military commanders in the Saudi desert briefed reporters on the beginning phases of Operation Desert Storm. They called the mission, to this point, encouraging. Lieutenant Mike Scott began the session by rattling off the military might behind the assault. Even as Operation Desert Storm rains terror on his country, Saddam Hussein remains defiant. This morning, he inspected the damage done to his capital and several nearby military bases. Earlier, during a radio address to his people, the Iraqi president warned the world of things to come.
These traitors will be overthrown after the defeat of the Satan in the White House. Bush. And in this poisonous hornet nest of confrontation, criminal Tel Aviv will also be beaten, and Palestine will be liberated, and its people will take their lands back.
Nations, I'm trying to get my scripts in order here. We're going to President Bush and getting his reactions to the Operation Desert Storm as of now.
How long this may last and at what cost?
Well, again, I don't want to go into questions here because of the moment. I will say that is covered very well by Secretary Cheney and Colin Powell, and the way we're going to handle this is I will not be commenting on the ups and downs, there will be some downs, or the trauma of the moment. There's a lot of trauma at the moment. But I think it is fair to say, and I will be repeating this to the leaders here, that we are pleased with the way things have gone so far. We are determined to finish what we've set out to do. But I just think, for procedural reasons, I'd like you all to know that I'm not going to be trying to do briefings from the White House on the details of the operations over there. I have full confidence in in our Secretary of Defense, and in our able Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and of course in our General Schwarzkopf. So for the future, though I will be in touch with the American people, I think it's better to leave the details of the operation to the briefings over there, and of course I'll be available for questions from time to time. But when we don't have all the information, I just would hate to risk misleading the American people. Having said that, I think all of us are very pleased that so far the operation is going forward with great success, and we keep praying that the loss of life will be held at an absolute minimum. And I feel so strongly about our troops over there. Certainly I feel that way about them, and I feel that way about the innocents who might get caught up in this conflict. So I think it's fair to say there's a lot of prayer going on both here on the Capitol Hill and across this whole country. And it'll be that way till this is concluded. That's all I want to say about it right now. Thank you.
It's been a busy morning in Washington, D.C. Just about an hour before the president spoke, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney underscored the U.S. commitment to see this war through to victory.
And I have to leave after a few minutes. General Powell and I will take a couple of questions, and then I'm going to sneak off and turn you over to my compatriot. To date, the operation is going very well. I want, though, at the outset of my remarks this morning, to emphasize the importance of being cautious in our comments. I don't mean to be critical of our friends in the press corps, but I think it's very, very important for people to remember a number of key things. That this is a very serious business, that we are in the very early stages of an operation that may run for a considerable period of time. That there have been casualties, and there are likely to be more casualties.
There is a military briefing going on right now in Saudi Arabia. We go to CNN for that now, live.
The air bombing has achieved its objectives accurately, and all our planes returned to their bases safely. Timing with the air bombing, the forces of advanced positions in the city of Khafji, previously evacuated from civilians, and in other positions were ordered to move to the main positions outside the range of aggressors' artillery fire, according to the scheduled plan. In response to our successful air operations, the aggressor shelled the Khafji area using artillery as it was expected. A number of oil tanks were hit. Elements from the Civil Defense Department have controlled fire on those tanks, except for 2 tanks of which their extinguishing is still underway. No loss in souls. The enemy fire sources were spontaneously destroyed by our artillery and Air Force. I will take some questions, and we limited them to 10 because there are some Arabic media and English media, and I hope you will make them short.
General, there was a report that at least 1 and perhaps 2 refineries were hit in Baghdad. Are you able to confirm this? This came from CNN, I believe, but are there any other sources that you can say would collaborate along with that information that 2 refineries were hit near Baghdad, or 2 oil installations?
I can't really confirm how many, but I confirm that there is a refinery or oil installations in Baghdad was hit.
Can I follow up just one more question? Are there any evacuations of the offshore platforms in the Safaniya, Zuluf, and Marjan fields, which are rather close to the area of hostilities?
Well, I can't really answer those questions exactly because it's for security reasons, but I tell you all the installations are, if there is any civilians or employees, they are evacuated for safety reasons. Thank you.
هل تتوقعون أي هجوم معين على مدن المنطقة الشرقية أو إطلاق أي صواريخ على الرياض خلال الأيام القادمة؟
في العمليات الحربية دائما تتوقع الأسوأ.
In military warfare, says the general, you always expect the worst. And we expect the worst. And we expect an aggression against any place in Saudi Arabia, in the kingdom.
يعني
The questioner asks,
يرجى أن لا يكون هناك شيء من هذا القبيل على ضوء النتائج الموجودة في المعركة حاليا.
do we expect that no such thing will happen as a result of the aerial bombardment? We cannot really speculate about the future, says the general. Were missiles shot, Iraqi missiles fired against the Saudi border or the allies, the multinational forces, there were no missiles, says the general, which were fired against us.
Questions and answers, please. Could you translate the questions and answers?
Well, if I repeat the question and answer, I'll maybe lose the time for answering your question.
General, can you say question in English? Do you still fear any attacks on Saudi Arabia, any missiles or anything? Is that still a fear?
Well, I told you we are taking all the precautions necessary to for expectations of any aggressions against our country.
General, are there other areas besides the one near the oil refinery that you are evacuating that are near the area of conflict?
Any area that's under dangerous of missiles or aggressions, I'm sure they are taking care of securing, the people that are working in them. I can't, specify what they are doing.
General, there have been reports that Iraqi soldiers were either seen or just the report itself that they were getting out of their uniforms and getting into civilian clothes to blend in with the rest of the population. Have any of your people told you anything like that?
Well, I hear that thing, but I can't confirm it really until I have very specific, confirmations from the authorities.
General, what is the state of the Iraqi Air Force now?
Well, from the news you heard, that they really didn't have any defense that can really count against our attacks on the targets that we already hit.
So is it no danger any longer?
I hope so.
Sir, what can you tell us about defectors from the Iraqi forces in Kuwait?
Defectors to Saudi Arabia?
Yes, sir.
There have been some in the past, and we are hoping, for their safety to surrender.
What about since the fighting began? Have there been any more defectors, an increase in defectors? How many have come across since the fighting began, the deadline?
Well, I can't really, for their own security, I can't really tell you how many of them.
There have been more, though, right? Is that right?
After the operations began?
Since the operation began?
Yes, they were. One question, please.
What about the Kuwait forces in these battles?
Like what I told you, that there were some Air Forces planes, they joined with the Operation Disaster Storm. Thank you. Thank you very much.
From Riyadh. And that, of course, was CNN live coverage of a Saudi Arabian military official holding a briefing on the military situation in the Persian Gulf. Now, Saudi Arabian officials are also satisfied with Operation Desert Storm so far, despite taking an early morning hit from Iraqi forces. The target was a huge oil refinery on the eastern coast of the kingdom. Jeremy Thompson captured some of the first pictures of the aftermath.
The cutting edge of the Allied land force, an American infantry unit dug in almost within sight of the Kuwait border. Their task to probe ahead of the front line as the Liberation Army moved forward. Straddling the main road to occupied Kuwait, they'd set up a checkpoint as a sudden stream of vehicles came towards them fleeing to the south. On the horizon, the reason why. A huge black trail of smoke betraying where in